The Wall Street Journal just exposed Trump's next target, Cuba. After successfully removing Venezuela's Maduro, the administration is now plotting to topple Cuba's communist government. They're searching for Cuban government insiders willing to cut deals. The plan mirrors Venezuela: find collaborators, promise immunity and power, execute regime change. Trump says he's bringing democracy to an oppressed island. Critics say he's launching a new era of American imperialism in Latin America. Today, SOPHIA and Liam battle. Is this liberation of 11 million Cubans, or illegal invasion for strategic control? Here's the secret planning that just leaked. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Trump administration is actively recruiting Cuban government officials, military leaders, intelligence officers, political elites, who will help facilitate regime change. The pitch: cooperate with removing Cuba's leadership, receive immunity from prosecution, maintain power in the new government. It's the exact playbook that worked in Venezuela, where VP Delcy Rodriguez helped remove Maduro. But here's what's going to shock you by the end of this video. The Cuba operation isn't just about democracy. It's about reversing 65 years of geopolitical humiliation and controlling the Caribbean. Cuba sits 90 miles from Florida, a strategic choke point. It hosts Chinese and Russian intelligence facilities, and there's speculation about massive offshore oil reserves. The question: is Trump finishing what Kennedy couldn't in the Bay of Pigs? Or is he launching illegal regime change across an entire region? The administration calls it supporting freedom. The UN calls it destabilizing Latin America. Cuba has announced emergency military preparations. SOPHIA says Cubans deserve freedom after decades of communist tyranny. Liam says this is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids.
Cuba has been a communist dictatorship for 65 years. The Cuban people have suffered under Castro family tyranny for 3 generations. If we can liberate them, we absolutely should. Look at Cuba's reality: political prisoners tortured in dark cells. No freedom of speech, press, or assembly. Economic collapse creating starvation. People fleeing on rafts across shark-infested waters because life in Cuba is so unbearable they'd risk death. The regime survives only through brutal repression. This isn't a legitimate government, it's a prison island. The Venezuela model proved regime change can work. Maduro's gone, Venezuela is stabilizing, and American support made it possible. Why shouldn't Cubans get the same opportunity? For 65 years we've waited for the regime to collapse or reform. It hasn't. Now we have the capability and will to help Cuban people overthrow their oppressors. And the strategic argument strengthens the case. Cuba hosts Russian intelligence and Chinese surveillance facilities 90 miles from America. They're a hostile actor in our hemisphere. Removing the regime serves both humanitarian and national security interests.
SOPHIA just endorsed the most dangerous foreign policy doctrine since Manifest Destiny. This isn't about Cuban freedom, it's about American empire. Let's be honest, the U.S. doesn't care about Cuban democracy. We care about Cuban location. 90 miles from Florida. Controls access to Gulf of Mexico. Strategic dominance of the Caribbean. If Cuba was in Central Africa with the same government, we'd ignore it completely. But because it's in our backyard, we claim the right to invade. And the Venezuela success SOPHIA celebrates? We installed a puppet government serving American oil interests while creating international crisis. That's not liberation, that's colonialism. Now she wants to repeat it in Cuba. Then what, Nicaragua? Bolivia? Every Latin American country that doesn't obey Washington. The Cuban people get to decide their government, not us. Yes, the regime is authoritarian. So are dozens of governments we support: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE. But those regimes sell us oil and buy our weapons. So SOPHIA doesn't demand regime change there. This is selective morality serving imperial interests.
Cubans can't decide their government. It's a dictatorship. There are no free elections. They need outside help to escape tyranny.
Then support Cuban opposition groups. Fund democracy movements. Don't invade and install whoever serves American business interests.
We tried that for 65 years. Sanctions, diplomacy, support for dissidents. Nothing worked. At some point, action is required.
Action meaning invasion. You're literally arguing for imperial conquest. That's 19th century colonialism with 21st century excuses.
So we've got secret regime change plotting, Cuban military on alert, and Latin America watching to see if they're next. But here's what neither side is addressing, and this is critical. If regime change succeeds in Cuba, it doesn't just affect 11 million Cubans. It signals to every nation that refuses American influence, comply or face invasion. Before we explore those global implications, I need to know where you stand. SOPHIA, blue symbol. Cubans deserve liberation from 65-year dictatorship. Liam, red symbol. This is illegal imperialism destabilizing Latin America. Your vote matters because this operation could reshape the entire Western Hemisphere. Now, let's examine what Cuba regime change actually means.
Let me explain why Cuban regime change is both morally necessary and strategically essential. Morally, the Cuban regime has imprisoned, tortured, and killed thousands of its own citizens for political dissent. Families are separated, children in Cuba, parents in Miami, because the regime won't let them leave together. Economic misery is intentional. The government controls all resources and keeps people dependent and weak. After 65 years of this, diplomatic solutions have failed. The regime will never voluntarily give up power. Strategically, Cuba is a forward operating base for American adversaries. Russian intelligence operates there. Chinese surveillance technology monitors U.S. military. During crises, Cuba could be used to threaten American security directly. A democratic Cuba eliminates these threats while bringing an ally into the Western Hemisphere. And the invasion language is dishonest. We're supporting internal opposition with resources and protection, not sending armies. If Cuban officials want to overthrow their own government and ask for our help, providing that help isn't imperialism, it's solidarity with freedom fighters.
SOPHIA's supporting internal opposition is whitewashing coup plotting. Let me explain what's actually happening and why it's catastrophic. The Wall Street Journal reported the U.S. is recruiting government insiders to betray their country in exchange for immunity and power. That's not supporting organic opposition. That's bribing officials to commit treason. When the U.S. does it, we call it democracy promotion. When Russia or China recruit American officials to overthrow our government, we call it espionage and treason. And the strategic argument reveals imperial thinking. Cuba threatens us by existing independently in our hemisphere. That's not a security threat. That's us demanding total regional control. The Monroe Doctrine said European powers couldn't colonize the Americas. Now we've revised it, we can. But nobody else can doubt if this succeeds. Every Latin American government knows. Align with Washington or face regime change. That's not democracy. That's a protection racket. And it'll push countries toward China and Russia for protection from us, creating exactly the threats SOPHIA claims to prevent.
So we just ignore 11 million people suffering under dictatorship 90 miles away? That's moral cowardice disguised as principle.
We engage diplomatically. Obama's normalization was working until Trump reversed it. Regime change through invasion guarantees suffering, not freedom.
And there's the impossible choice. Help people suffering under dictatorship versus respecting sovereignty and international law. Can both be moral? Must we choose? But here's that uncomfortable truth we promised. The Cuba operation isn't primarily about Cubans. It's about sending a message to every nation in Latin America and globally that defies U.S. influence. Venezuela fell. Cuba is next. The pattern is clear. Cooperate with American economic and strategic interests or face regime change. This reveals a broader shift in American foreign policy. For decades, the U.S. worked through international institutions, sanctions, and diplomatic pressure. Now, under Trump, we're returning to direct intervention, toppling governments, installing allies, controlling resources. It's effective in achieving short-term goals, but devastates international norms. Other major powers are watching and learning. If America can invade Venezuela and Cuba, why can't Russia do the same in its neighborhood? Why can't China? The real question isn't whether Cuba's government is bad. It clearly is authoritarian. The question is whether the United States should unilaterally decide which governments deserve to exist and use military force to change them. That's the power every empire has claimed throughout history. And every empire that claimed it eventually overextended and collapsed. But that question, American power and its limits, connects to something happening right now that reveals how power is actually exercised. While Trump plots foreign regime change, he's simultaneously trying to change domestic power structures. The Supreme Court is deciding whether Trump can fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, attempting to bring the Fed under presidential control. Same pattern. Centralize power, eliminate independence, control everything. In foreign policy, it's removing uncooperative governments. In domestic policy, it's removing independent institutions. Both claim they're restoring proper authority. Critics say both destroy protective barriers against tyranny. The Federal Reserve case affects your money, your savings, your economic future directly. Every living Fed chair and Treasury secretary united against Trump's power grab. It's constitutional crisis over who controls the economy. SOPHIA and Liam are about to explode over whether the Fed should be independent or politically controlled. That battle is happening now. Watch it next.